Hey there. I'd just love to get back to American Miscellany. I don't know, just excited about getting to this next essay, Expulsion of the Acadians. So we are reading American Miscellany, published in 1865. We're here on page 138. We've just read a little poem called The Western Emigrant. That would have been essay number 59. But we are moving on the same page, essay number 60. So let's go ahead and get into it. I have no idea what to expect here. All right. Expulsion of the Acadians. Some dispute existing between the English and the French respecting the territorial limits of both parties, the region about Hudson's Bay, and the province of Acadie, I guess that's the French, the province of Acadie, since called Nova Scotia, to settle the matter, were ceded to Great Britain in 1713. Acadie was inhabited by an excellent French population. When these good people found that their country yielded to England, and themselves no longer subjects of the French king, they were grieved to be forced to acknowledge another master. They knew that the French and English were hostile to each other, and they dreaded to be compelled, some time or other, to take up arms against Frenchmen. They therefore entreated the English that they might never be forced to so painful a service, and might be excused from taking the oath of allegiance. This request received no special attention, but for a time a kind forbearance was exercised towards them. After a period of 40 years, the English government came to the conclusion that these neutral French, as they were called, might become dangerous to their interests by taking part with the Canadian French, their active enemies. On account of this presumed danger, without the least alleged provocation, or the least show of justice, they took upon themselves to drive out of their possession this peaceable, prosperous, and unoffending people. The Acadians had no warning of their fate. At harvest time they were ordered to assemble in a certain district, and being collected, were informed they were prisoners, that their lands, cattle, and movables were no longer their own, but were confiscated by government, that they might take what they could convey away, but must immediately quit the province. In one single district, 255 houses, as many barns, 11 mills, and 1 church were destroyed. Ships were in readiness to convey the persecuted Acadians to different parts of the continent, to Louisiana, to French Guiana in South America, and to distant places in the then British provinces on the Atlantic. These people had been remarkable for their industry, their skillful husbandry, their pure morals, and their exemplary piety. Their lands produced wheat and corn, potatoes and flax abundantly. Their houses were convenient and furnished with all things accessory to comfort. Their numerous flocks afforded the wool which was manufactured in the family for their clothing. They had no paper money and little silver or gold, and lived by simple exchange of commodities. Beautiful. So little contention arose among them that courts and lawyers were needless. Paradise. The wise and experienced decided their small differences. They were Catholics. The priests drew up their public acts, wrote their wills, and kept possession of the documents until death called for the execution of them. To requite these services, the inhabitants allowed them 1/27 of the harvest for their subsistence. At the time of the dispersion, the Acadians were 18,000 in number. No want existed among them. The poor were few, and the prosperous cheerfully supported those. Those unfortunate people were the victims of their own integrity. Had they taken the oath which demanded of them to violate the best affections, they might have retained their houses, their fields, and their flocks. Their good feelings demanded only the innocent liberty of neutrality. In September 1755, Colonel Winslow, an officer usually resident at Marshfield, Plymouth County, Massachusetts, was sent with the King's Commission to demolish the property of the neutrals and to expel them without exception from the province. Colonel Winslow deeply regretted that he should be employed for this cruel service. He knew, so he said, that they were aware of the same species, with himself, and it was disagreeable to his make and temper to inflict pain. His first measure, on landing at Saint-Pré, was to make prisoners of several hundreds of the most considerable of the men of the settlement. In consequence of their earnest entreaties, the prisoners were permitted, 10 at once, to return to visit their wretched families and to look for the last time upon their beautiful fields and their loved and lost homes. These unhappy men bore their misfortune with firmness until they were ordered on board the transport ship to be dispersed among people whose customs, language, and religion were opposed to all they held dear and sacred. On the 16th of September, the prisoners were drawn up 60, and the young men, 160 in number, were ordered to go on board the vessels. They refused to do this unless their families might be permitted to accompany them. This was denied, and the soldiers were ordered to do their duty. The wretched Acadians no longer resisted, but marched from their chapel of Saint-Pré to the ships. The road from the chapel to the shore, just 1 mile in length, was crowded with women and children who, on their knees and with eyes and hands raised to heaven, entreated blessings on their young friends, so unmercifully torn from them. Some of the latter broke out into bitter lamentations, others prayed aloud, and another portion sang mournful hymns as they took their way to the ships. The seniors formed another detachment, and their departure occasioned a similar scene of distress. Other vessels arrived, and their wives and children followed. Their dwellings were burnt before their eyes, and the work of destruction was complete. 18,000 souls were cast forth upon the pitiless world. Desolate and depopulated was the beautiful tract they had occupied. Their homes lay smoking in ruins. The cattle, abandoned by their protection, assembled about the forsaken dwelling places, anxiously seeking their wonted masters. And all night long the faithful watchdogs howled for the hands that had fed and the roofs that had sheltered them. The distress of one family will serve to exhibit the sufferings of these refugees. There was among them a notary public named René Leblanc. He loved the English. On one occasion, the Indians would have persuaded him to assist them in an attempt upon the English. He refused, and the Indians, in resentment, made him a prisoner and detained him 4 years. At the time of the expulsion, Leblanc was living at an advanced age. His fidelity to the English and his sufferings on that account deserved favor, but he found none. Leblanc had 20 children and about 150 grandchildren. These were embarked in different vessels and scattered in different provinces. The unfortunate old man was set ashore in New York with his wife and the 2 youngest of their children. Love for those that were scattered led him from one strange city to another. He reached Philadelphia. There he found 3 of his children, and there, despairing to recover the rest in penury and sorrow, he sank into his grave. It may be questioned if the history of the world exhibits a more heart-rending incident than the exile of this amiable and unhappy people. When the traveler contemplates the noble dikes reared by their industry, while he walks beneath the shade of their abundant orchards and stands over the ruins of their cottages, or muses among their graves, his imagination goes back to a scene of rural felicity and purity, seldom seen in the world, and his heart melts at the sudden and dreadful fate of the Acadians.